All right, well, I'd like to kick this off. I appreciate everyone stopping by. How's the conference going so far? Just having a good time? Awesome. Did you guys get any puppies while you were out there? Or did you focus on the beers? Cookies. Okay, good. Well, this breakout is it's room for improvement. It's a Capex and PIP discussion. And what I want to do is kind of tee it up with who's on stage. I'm David Breeding, Senior VP of Design and Construction with Aimbridge. I've been with Aimbridge almost 2 years now. My prior roles are I've been on the brand side, leading design and construction for brands with Gaylord Hotels and IHG. I've been on the third-party hotel management side, running design and construction. I'm a licensed architect as well. Been with a couple of different big firms, Gensler and RTKL. So I kind of bring a full holistic perspective to the table. And with that, I've got some very esteemed experts here that are a lot smarter than I am. So I'd like to turn it over to Sarah first to give a little bit of introduction as to who she is.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Cantrell. I'm Director of Business Development for Benjamin West. We are the world's leading purchasing firm. We purchase over $1.5 million a day on behalf of all of our major clients in FF&E and OS&E. And we do everything from extended stay to full service, select service, luxury, and we do work in 40 countries and 6 territories. We have 4 offices in the U.S., in Boulder, Chicago, Dallas, and then we also have an office in London. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Kata?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon. My name is Kata Cooper. I'm actually a licensed architect as well. Been with IHG now for 10 years. Actually worked with David for some years. I lead the premium renovations team for IHG. The 4 brands that we cover are Even, Hotel Indigo, Crown Plaza, and Voco. I have a mighty team of 6 that cover the U.S., Canada, and also the Caribbean. And thanks for having me on the panel.
Great. Chris, how about you?
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Carissa Atwood. I'm here from Phoenix, where I'm based. I've been in the hospitality industry for 24 years. 23 of those years I worked for a hospitality development company as an owner's rep. And last year I started my own company called FF&E Consultants. And what I do is I navigate the process, the design process with ownership from the very beginning stages, pre-planning, budgeting, scheduling for the design process in FF&E, all through turnover to the end of the project. An example of my project experiences, I've done everything from new build 1,000-room plus hotels down to the tiniest luxury boutique hotels, lots of rebranding, lots of PIPs, lots of renovations. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while, so thanks, Hunter, for inviting me on the panel.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Ben Murphy. I'm the founder, president, and CEO of a company called Hospitality Logistics International. We provide transportation, warehousing, install services for FF&E and OS&E. So we do all the grunt work. So we move everything from around the world, we store it, and then finally install it in the hotels. It's great to be here. Looking forward to talking to everybody for the next few minutes.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you. Also, kind of as we're going to get into this, I think we're going to set a little bit of ground rules first. We're going to take questions after we've kind of gone through our discussions. It's going to be a very organic conversation, but really what we want to do is focus on a little bit about CapEx, PIPs and renovations and sort of what that is, set some expectations. We're going to talk a little bit about budgeting, some planning items, some implementation, supply chain, et cetera. And so along with that, I think, as we all get into projects, the first thing we've got to do is we've got to set expectations. And so setting expectations, I think, is probably one of the most important things. That's what leads us into those successful projects, and don't take for granted what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. Let's have those conversations. So with that, I'd like to maybe turn it over to Kata a little bit. What are your thoughts on setting expectations related to PIPs?
Yeah, so setting expectations with PIPs, very good question. With PIPs, that gives us the opportunity to work with owners to implement kind of our brand standards in a set time frame for the property, right, to bring it up to snuff. There are a lot of different types of PIPs, right? Some are connected to license action. Others might be a part of a mid-cycle program. We just rolled out a mid-cycle program for our premium brands at our conference just last year. And essentially, that program is where every 7 years we look for it and ask owners to upgrade their properties from a soft goods standpoint. And then every 14 years we look for a full renovation. So what's in the soft goods PIP? A soft goods PIP, we essentially look for replacement of fabrics, wall finishes, flooring, artwork, lampshades, those kinds of things. And then every 14 years, as I had mentioned, we look for a full PIP that would include those soft good items that I had mentioned, but also replacement of millwork, case goods, armoires, nightstands, lighting, mirrors, those kinds of things. So I think, that's a way kind of to get on the same page with the owner on what the scope is and begin to set expectations for their project.
And along those lines, and I think there's somewhat of maybe a misconception in the business or in the industry is when a PIP is written and then when it's underwritten, there's often a missing component in that, and that missing component is something I think, Sarah, you can touch base on, which is the Capex side of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So as an industry, we are spending about $15 billion a year in Capex, and that includes repair and maintenance as well. And as a percentage of total revenue, that's about 8% on average over the last decade. The last two Capex studies, which I'm holding here the book. This is the ISHC, International Society of Hospitality Consultants. I'm an associate member. Every 5 years, we do a Capex study. So this book covers data points from over 700 hotels, 3,000 total data points, and it's a really useful tool that measures the total capital expenditures in the industry. So come up to me afterwards if you want the link. It's ishc.com, and you click on the resources tab. You can order a copy. It's a really useful tool for planning.
And Chris, to turn it over to you, a quick question. When you get the PIP and you underwrite the PIP, and then you notice that there's a lot of Capex items that have been deferred maintenance for many, many years as the industry has sort of experienced, how do you go about having a conversation with CADA on how to negotiate what's in the PIP, what's not in the PIP from a timeline perspective? How can you push things back and forth?
Right, I think it's always best to be transparent on what you have and what you need to do, and just that's how I approach it. I see that you want me to do all these things in the PIP. I can see that we can do these things, but we might need to push some things off a little bit, ask for suggestions. That's just how we approach it. We just straight up ask the questions.
Yeah, just.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's important to have that communication, right, and that conversation. When we write PIPs, we don't do it in a vacuum. I think it's, I can think of one PIP that recently executed about a year ago, and the scope that we had example was for the exterior. We had them to paint the building and then also apply exterior signage. But as the owner kind of went forward with the PIP, they did a bit of discovery and saw that there was some building envelope issues that really is a Capex deal, right? And so what we did was they kind of raised their hand. They said, we can't really complete the PIP in the timeline that you have. So what we did was we extended the timeline for them so that they could address those envelope issues and then come back and finish up with the painting and also the signage. So I think that conversation is really important.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had a renovation a couple years ago. It was 500 rooms. We got into the first 250 rooms and there was a mold problem.
Right.
So we were a little bit delayed, but we worked with the brand, and it just being transparent, talking through the issues so they understand what's going on is key.
And I think the other thing about this is, as we've kind of heard, the common theme through the last day and a half has been relationships and working closely with your brand partners, your design partners, your contractors, your purchasing agents, your supply chain, all that. So I've been on the brand side before for total of about 10 years, 2 different companies. And I think what we see is the brands have a much stronger vested interest in the success of your hotel than probably you do, because they have an estate to maintain. but using them as an ally and not considering them being up on an ivory perch, I think, as we all thought of maybe 10 or 15, 20 years ago. But I think they're a strong partner, and I think working with Kata and his team and other brands allow us to do that. But switching gears a little bit, the other challenge too goes back to budgeting, which, you know, Sarah, you mentioned. The amount of FF&E reserves set aside is never enough to actually do a renovation, and we know that. So we've always got to put in extra money, but we've got to work very closely on doing that. And so with that, you know, we've got the brand, we've got purchasing agent, we've got an actual project management firm doing it, and then we got Ben at the end, who probably feels left out of the conversation thus far, but is critical in it. But how do you tie all four of those together? And Ben, what experience do you have? When do you get in the project? Sure. And how do you sort of help influence the budget? Because a lot of our FF&E is coming from overseas, or it's we've got a lot of shipping costs associated with that.
So good question. I think one of the big changes that's happened in the marketplace, you know, pre-pandemic, the supply chain from both a rate and execution perspective was pretty much without disruption. You know, if you look back from the mid 1990s all the way up until the pandemic, ocean rates and predictability and on-time delivery was pretty consistent. And then obviously since the pandemic, that's greatly changed. And I think what happens is that the budgeting allocation hasn't totally adjusted the way it should. You know, the rates went way up during the pandemic. They've come way back down. They've gone back up again. I think what we're going to see going forward is that there's going to be a pretty strong unpredictability about pricing consistency over the course of a job setup. So when an owner sits down and budgets out what they're going to pay for transportation, warehouse, and install, there has to be some contingency that gets built in there. Obviously, the marketplace is changing pretty dramatically, pretty consistently now going forward. So I think what we try to do is get in front of it and say, what have you allocated? Let us validate that so you have that information up front, and we can really get the budget a lot more locked into what it's actually going to end up being.
Great. And then Sarah, the multiplier mostly is the guest room. And how transparent are you with your owners when you actually lay out a budget and give them the pros and cons as it ties back to not only the budget, but the quality, but the timeline associated with that? How do you work through that process?
Yeah, so ideally we want to be hired the same time that the design firm is hired on a project, so we can have a collaborative call up front and make sure that the owner especially is giving the designer a budget to design to. That needs to happen up front in order for the project to flow more seamlessly through the back end. And we're able to really talk about which vendors to use and not to use. Knowing which vendors not to use is probably more important today for any specific project based on the location and the schedule. So getting involved early and making sure that that budget is set up front and that everyone is working off of the same budget is key.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, what challenges do you run into when you're underwriting?
One of the biggest challenges I find, and I think Sarah will agree, is not enough time for the FF&E. Especially if you're doing an extensive renovation, you're most likely going to have to do a model room. And I can't tell you how many times I am approached with a schedule and nobody's layered in the months it takes to put in a model room. So you're playing catch up, or your timeline's going to get extended because of that. So that's the biggest challenge, I think, in addition to the budgeting up front, is making sure someone that knows about FF&E lead times, like your purchasing agent or consultant, has put input into the schedule for you so that you don't run into any surprises at the end or midway through.
Yeah.
Right, and if you're scheduled to do a production run next year, let's say you have a PIP, for 18 months, at least get that model room going now, get that in process, have the model room review. I mean, there's so many things that are discovered in the model room. It's good to compare two vendors for the same commodity, and also to have two countries of origin from each commodity in the model room, because while we have global reach and we have our ear to the ground every day on the global supply chain, we're still not smart enough to know if a year from now one country is going to be experiencing some issues over another country. So it's good to have that option going into production.
Yeah, and so really kind of what we've been talking about for the last 10 or 15 minutes is, one, understanding the PIP, understanding the Capex needs, two, understanding the budgeting, which then all this, falls right back into proper planning. And I think if we run into projects with the assumption that they're going to be done the same way they were done 5 or 10 years ago, we're going to run into some hiccups along the way because of the market changing, supply chain issues, logistics issues, consultant issues, contractors. I mean, I think the most important thing is to really prepare a detailed plan. Let's talk a little bit about that from your perspective. When you get involved in a project, the owner probably says, I want it done by this time. You look at the PIP and the PIP says, no, it's got to be done 6 months prior or a year prior, or it should have been done 3 years prior. How do you address those issues with the not only with your client, but also interfacing with the brand and the supply chain?
So to your point on planning, read through the PIP, all of it, and see what it's going to entail. And get your consultants on board immediately that need to help you with the budgeting and the timeline for the PIP. Don't wait on that, because if you're looking at the PIP as a comprehensive plan and not just looking at certain pages and pieces of it, you'll be able to put together a better overall project plan. You'll know which consultants you need to bring on board. If it's just a furniture refresh, you might need you'll need a purchasing agent and whatnot. But there are, renovations and PIPs that require, architects, fire life safety consultants, code consultants, those types of things. So just laying out the plan with the group, with ownership, on who they need to bring on, get those conversations started early, and come up with a game plan as a team on how to approach the PIP is what we like to do.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, a show of hands, how many people use the differentiation document when they start their projects and use their projects?
Always.
Okay, I see 2 hands. I think going back to establishing expectations and resetting expectations, you have to put a differentiation document in place, or you have to put something in place that lets Sarah know what Chris is doing, which is what Kate is expecting, and then where does Ben tie into it? And then if I'm the owner, I need to know exactly everything that's going on. But I think often what we find out, if you boil down the issues at hand, it always goes back to, well, I thought you were doing that, or I didn't understand that, or there's a miscommunication on this. So always asking those questions, and I'm sure we have plenty of horror stories we can share, and I'm sure you've got plenty of horror stories you can share with us, but I have a differentiation document. I don't mind sharing it with everyone, because I think you've also heard within the industry and in some of the prior panels, we're all one big family in this Hunter conference. We all do the same work. We all help each other out. We all compete against one another, but we also share information. So if you guys want one, shoot me an email and I'll send you the one that I use. But it's simple. It's who designs it, who budgets it, who purchases it, who installs it. I mean, it's very, very clear. And sometimes it's overwhelming when you look at the detail, because sometimes it's 8, 9, 10, 12 pages. But there's things that you forget. Like, I learned the hard way on a project that I was working on, 1,500 room hotel, and the electrical contractor came to me and said, all right, where's the light bulbs? I'm like, what, you don't have the bulbs? He's like, no, I don't. That was a multi-million-dollar problem that I had to solve, that I assumed he had, he assumed we had, no one had it. So we had to figure that out. You think about a 1,500 room hotel with about 100,000 square feet of meeting space, that's a lot of lights.
Yeah.
So you kind of learn the hard way, but that's important. But any thoughts on anything
that's
you would do differently?
Yeah, that's the number one thing that should be discussed on the kickoff call is the diff doc responsibilities matrix. We also have one we're happy to share with you. Come up to me afterwards if you want one. It's really important to identify, as David said, what's to be designed by, purchased by, and received and installed by. And it's really, really critical also to identify what's in FF&E versus OS&E scope, because TVs, mattresses could easily be in FF&E or OS&E. Vanity, base and top, that's FF&E, which used to be in GC scope 10 to 15 years ago. It's now mostly FF&E. So identifying, making sure that nothing is missed completely, like David said with the light bulbs, or counted twice is really important.
Yeah, it's a really important document. It's probably one of the strongest tools I use on my project for a lot of reasons. It solves a lot of problems. It's easy to go look, oh yeah, this person's responsible for this person isn't. Lately I've seen a lot of construction type items trying to be put into FF&E. So, that helps with that. And then also I like to get those documents put together before contracts are written, because they can be attached to the contract, and then there's no question, later on when the purchasing agent says, I'm not purchasing wall covering. Well, yes, you are. It's right here. So.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about supply chain. We heard that in some of the prior sessions we've heard, but let's touch base on supply chain. I know there's this misconception of, well, we can't go offshore, we should go domestic. But let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of that.
Sure.
Ben, do you want to take that?
Yeah, certainly I don't do any purchasing, so I'll leave that to the rest of the panel. But the world is obviously global, and what you can see today is that still Asia and the Far East are still the 800-pound gorilla. So I think China and Vietnam are still going to be dominant players, although we see more manufacturing going into Canada and Mexico. There's a couple of European suppliers that are coming out. I think the problem is scale. If the industry was much smaller and we weren't spending $15 billion a year, you could probably find other alternatives that would suit the needs of what's out there. But a lot of the domestic manufacturing, both in Canada, the US, and Mexico, is at full capacity. So unless there is a major change within the landscape of manufacturing, overseas is still going to be a pretty dominant option. And because of that, you've got a Pacific Ocean to transfer over. I think there's going to be constantly issues going forward regarding on-time delivery and execution that we'll talk a little bit later about. But from a time perspective and allocation, I think that really needs to be addressed on how these jobs are being handled, because basically everybody's gotten comfortable with Amazon Prime, right? So everybody's used to something coming almost on-time delivery. It's going to come next day. I don't have it. And consciously or subconsciously, that's sort of like eked into people's minds. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've gotten owners or people call and say, why can't it be there tomorrow? Why can't I have it? I'll air freight it. Air freight doesn't mean it comes tomorrow. Like, there's a big difference, right? People think like, oh, we'll just put it on a plane. And well, it's not exactly how that process works. So I think really sitting down and setting a realistic schedule. If you have an opening date, we can help you educate what it's really going to take. And would you rather be 30 days earlier with the product and be on time versus spending a little extra in warehousing and storage costs versus not hitting the opening date? And I think there's been a lot of downward pressure on execution, and really the geopolitical world, I don't think is going to change anytime soon. And unfortunately, one of the levers that people can pull is supply chain. And that is going to be a constant battle going forward that I don't think will change. And the days of predictability, I think, are long gone. So not to add in the weather, that seems to be an ongoing issue. The 100-year storm is now once a quarter. So with that problem in facing us going forward, I think the challenges of getting things on time is going to be critical, and building the right schedule will allow the job to actually execute and deliver on time.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, what I advise owners to do in their teams is to get the schedule early, right? Like right at the project kickoff. Even if you don't have a GC on board and you have your design team on board, they can give you a design schedule, right? Where they put in not only the design submittals, what the review time will take, also, the model room built out, those kinds of things. And then what I would really advise is, after you get your plans approved, don't sit around to order. Go ahead and order, right? So that you have a bit of a cushion. Even if you feel like you're ahead of schedule, order that FF&E. In your schedule, you should also have, the demo time that it's going to take, so that once your FF&E does arrive, you can go ahead and start to install that product. So it's important just to have a sense of urgency, right, to get that PIP done. Because the sooner you get that PIP done, the quicker your hotel is fully online and can see its full potential in terms of generating revenue.
And Sarah, back on the question of domestic or China, Asia, wherever, what are your thoughts on that? Where are you seeing, not only from a turnaround time, but a price time, but a quality time? Because I know we all know a guy who can get something much cheaper, and the guy we know is not always the best quality.
Yeah, so overall, lead times are way, way better than they were, 2020 and 2021 during the peak of COVID. Like outdoor seating at one point was a 50-week lead time. Yeah. We're not seeing that anymore, but we still cannot count on lead times being, the pre-COVID 18 to 22-week lead time. As you said, we need time. The more time you can give the entire team, the better off. And if you're paying for a couple more months of warehousing to warehouse the FF&E is way better than displacement of revenue by not having a product there to install. So back to your question, it really matters what commodities we're talking about. Carpet, wall covering is domestic pretty much all the time. Case goods, seating, and lighting is from overseas. So even if you're looking at lighting and it says US assembled, a lot of those component parts are still coming from China, so you need to be aware of that in factoring lead times. And we also, to Ben's point, we need to be careful. It depends on the type of project that you're working on. Usually the higher end the project, the better chances that everything's going to be made in Vietnam and China for case goods. They have the ability to deliver on the quality, and that's something that you need to account for with lead times. And overall, it's like I said, it's way better, but we still need to plan ahead and make sure that you're giving yourself time, and don't lump China and Vietnam into one box. You need to separate China and Vietnam, because during COVID, China was 90% open at one point and Vietnam was fully shut, and then 3 months later it switched. So having the ability to have your ear to the ground and have options on which vendors to use is key. And then even right now, China is in a deflationary period and Vietnam is still looking at about 3.5% inflation. So it's good to look at all those factors early on.
And I think to Ben's point, nothing is predictable anymore. And you touched on lighting. Lighting was always the wild card, and I think still is the wild card. So if you can order lighting quicker, you're going to be much better off. Case goods, you pretty much are okay from my perspective. What about your perspective? Have you seen lighting that is still the wild card?
Lighting's always a wild card for me. But yes, starting the design, especially larger fixtures, decorative fixtures, starting the design process and the shop drawing process very early on is beneficial, because lighting can have a hefty lead time. And back to the point on planning ahead in warehousing, I'm a strong advocate for getting it early and getting it in a warehouse. Your costs for warehousing product are going to be minimal compared to the possibility of not having your furniture in time and having empty rooms with no furniture. So planning ahead for that is crucial, I think, on a project, and it helps the contractor immensely.
Yeah, I think to that point, when you start a project and you look at displacement and then you find out that product is being delayed and you're still not able to rent those rooms, and that displacement just continues to build and build and build, and the next thing you know, you get the finger pointing with the contractor and they're arguing it back and forth.
Yeah, and also don't liquidate the old until you make sure the new one has arrived.
Right. Right.
That's a good point.
That's a great point. Kind of switching gears, we're getting close to kind of wrapping up, but I want to leave this open for a couple of questions. But I did want to sort of ask a few pointed questions of, for the panel, if we were hotel owners, what's the one thing we would do differently? And so whoever wants to take that one first can.
I'm happy to chime in. It'd be more than one thing, though.
Okay.
I think in getting a qualified team on board is super important, right? A team that can do kind of a mainstream mid-scale product may not be the team that can do a premium product, right? And so at IHD, for example, we do have a qualified designer list for all of our different brands that we can make available to you, and that my team would deliver with the PIP for your consideration. You may actually have someone in mind, right? We're happy to review their portfolio of that particular design team, just to be able to opine on that and give you our opinion on whether or not they're qualified or not. Some of the other points that we hit on earlier, the more successful owners, they come ready, right? Like as soon as that project executes and we do the project kickoff, they have a schedule that's ready for us to review. And then we can kind of critique and say, okay, well, this looks good, but have you put in permitting, into the equation, right? Have you put the model room into the equation? That kind of thing. And so a schedule is huge. And then I would say with the qualified team, with the schedule, and then just have a sense of urgency, right? So make sure that once you're kind of towards, again, those approved plans, that you go ahead and order it on time so that that product gets there and you can get it installed.
Two quick ones for me. Going back to, we talked about doing a model room. The one thing we've learned, and I think it's the real benefit to the owner, is that when you do a model room, you learn two things. One, what's going to work or not going to work, but also we can also give a lot of feedback on potential items that you are going to purchase. Hey, how it should be packed, how it should be assembled, to ensure that actually when installation comes, instead of doing one room, we're doing 500 rooms, we can come back and say, listen, this is going to be a major problem. This is not going to fit. You've put it in perfectly in a model room. It's great, but the floor is not going to be level in every. We can give really critical, direct feedback on how you can go and have those plans, those shop drawings updated and manufactured, and that will be a huge win when the actual job comes. And the second thing is, when you go through the schedule, this is more of an installation comment, but the GC is going to make the installation schedule work to what's best for them. Doesn't mean it's great for the rest of the trades. It's very important that you talk to outside parties, let it be an owner's rep or ourselves. I can't tell you the number of times we get, when the schedule gets compressed, the GC will come back and say, oh no, we fixed it all. HLI is going to install 50 rooms in 3 days. And then the owner comes in, this is a great schedule, and we're like, no one can do that. Like, oh, well, the GC said they can do it. Have at it. And then they say, it changes. So I think it's really important that you guys think about, when you look at that, you actually have someone critique it outside of them to give you honest feedback so you make sure it works.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to start a new hashtag today, and it's don't sit on your PIP. Don't hold off looking at your PIP. If it comes across your desk, comes across your email, don't shove it aside to look at next week and then shove it aside to look at the next week, because the sooner you can see what you're up against and start planning for that, the better. You're going to get better consultants. You're going to get your furniture in time. You're going to, everything's going to go so much smoother if you don't procrastinate on your PIP, on reviewing your PIP.
Yeah. And I think to your point, don't sit on the PIP. How many projects have we all done, been involved in, that the PIP was written 3, 4, 5 years ago, and the brand standards have changed about 10 times, because most brand standards change twice a year. And then you're dealing with, well, that's not how I underwrote it. Well, I'm sorry, but there's not much I can do about that. So going back and moving as quickly as you can, because then it puts CATA and other brands in a precarious situation where they want to be as flexible as they can, but they can't be that flexible because you got an expired PIP, and technically they should be able to rewrite that PIP if they want to. But move quickly.
Yeah, typically PIPs have an expiration date. So typically we'll look at around 9 months to a year, just kind of depending on the situation, and we can kind of evaluate whether or not we need to come back and revisit your property or not. But certainly, I totally agree. Don't sit on the PIP. Have that sense of urgency to move forward. And we're here to help, right? I have a team, again, a mighty team of 6 that can, like, as soon as your project executes, we set up a project kickoff, and then we have monthly touch points with owners, just to kind of keep them on pace and make it very clear kind of what the next steps are in the process.
Yeah. Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you all haven't caught on by now, the theme of this panel is time. We need time to be able to execute, and you need time to assemble the right team. I was talking to a major GC. I see them sitting in the front row right here. They're based in Washington area. They're getting contacted now for projects to start in June, and they're having to turn those people away and say, we don't have time to price it out, and definitely not enough time to assemble all the materials and the labor. So that's just one example of, like, everyone needs time, and you need to assemble the right team. And my last piece of advice is don't buy consultants by the pound. Don't look to a low fee on the spreadsheet when making decisions. Really pick the team to work with that can add the best value to the project at the end of the day, based on the relationships and everything that they know.
And I think one of my pet peeves is don't just send an email, because you lose so much in translation in an email. If the email goes back and forth 2 or 3 times, pick up the phone, have a conversation. It'll solve a lot of issues, and I think we run into that. But so, you've heard a lot about, budgeting and planning and setting expectations, supply chain issues. There's just, we could talk for a long time about just the whole industry in and of itself, but I think we're all in this together. And I think the thing that we'd like to sort of let everyone know is we're here to help you guys out. Look, I'm with Aimbridge. We're the largest hotel management company in the world. I run design and construction, but I'm here to help out, whether it's I'm doing work for you or not. Pick up the phone, call, email. Because we're all here to help each other out. I look around and I see all the people in here, and we've helped each other out in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's who we are and what we do. So just be happy to extend that to anyone. But kind of wrapping up, or just want to open it up. We got about 5 more minutes. And any questions any of you may have? I know there's some non-bashful ones.
Hey, David.
Hey, Robert.
Robert Official Gensler. When our designers get through the design approval process, they usually, develop a budget based on quantities and estimated cost of things, and prepare that, and then distribute it to the owner and procurement agent for pricing and confirmation on that. Recently, we've seen a trend, and I'm curious if you guys are seeing this trend or if these are one-offs, but in our preamble, we talk about the owner and/or procurement agent confirming the handing of left and right handing of furniture and quantities. And I'm starting to see people push back on the quantities. And the owner's caught in the middle going, well, my designer's not going to stand by the quantities. The procurement agent's not standing by quantities. What do we do? So thoughts, is this a trend? Are these one-offs?
So Robert, let me repeat the question. So the designs get finished, they get submitted to the brand approves them, quantities are put in place, and there's a bit of pushback from either the project management team or the purchasing agent not verifying quantities being left or right in the final counts before budgets are finalized. So Sarah, you want to touch base on that one?
Yes, so as far as quantities are concerned, we do a high-level gut check, we like to say. So if there's 100 king rooms, if there's 98 headboards on the matrix, we better raise our hands and ask why there's 98 and not 100. But as procurement agents, we're not going to know if there's a special room type by the elevator, there's a bump out bay and it needs an extra floor lamp, or an upholstered headboard panel versus something that's clear to the wall. We're not going to know that. So it's really best that the whole team talks up front on the expectations, maybe even before there's contracts signed, to make sure that we know who is responsible for the quantities and counts up front, and ideally it should fall on the designer to confirm counts, and then we do the high-level gut check.
Yeah, I agree. I end up, if I'm not involved with the interior design scope, and it doesn't list that out, and the purchasing agent isn't doing it, I usually end up doing it, the project management team or the consultant. But I always have the interior design team just spot check and double check what I've come up with. Because it's never good to have like one, just like Sarah was saying with quantities, everyone's looking at the plans, but if you're coming up with different quantities, it's good to come together and see what the problem is there. Same with lefts and rights, and that can get really tricky. You need someone to sit down and look at all the room types and the plans and safes even, the swing on the safes, from install and mini fridges. And, so yes, I ultimately will help do that, but then, or your project management company can help do that, but then we always go back to the interior designer to verify.
But I think, Robert, to your point, I think it's something that I'm seeing in the industry that they're not wanting to actually do the counts. But I think it goes back to setting expectations, going back to the diff doc and making sure everyone understands the diff doc and understands whose responsibility it is. And just make sure you buy that service, because we can't take it for granted anymore that the way we did business 5 or 10 years ago is how we're doing business today. So we've got to ask those questions.
We're noticing like a big trend towards sustainability, carbon offsets, especially with big brands like Bridge or even IHG especially. How have you seen that impact everything that you do across the table here? And also, what platforms are you using to measure like that carbon offset across different vendors or across different pieces of equipment that you're buying or considering, if you know all?
So the question is, how are we addressing sustainability at not only the design level, but also at the project management side of the business? And then how are we measuring that, and what platforms are we using to measure that? So who would like to?
Yeah, so we are starting to put sustainability scope items in our PIPs, low flow fixtures, LED light fixtures, those kinds of things. And then as the years kind of progress, we put in additional measures that kind of tie to the equipment that's bought, those kinds of things. So we will review it during the design review process to make sure that those items have been addressed in the PIP. And then once the renovation happens, then our team will go out to make sure that those items were actually installed.
From a transportation perspective, there's a program out there called SmartWay, which is you keep records of the drivers, the truckers that you use, depending on how old the engines are. You can report that back, and we've got a select group of owners that look for that data on a year-to-year basis, and we submit that back to them on a project-by-project level. So obviously the ocean business is doing a big turn right now. Liquefied natural gas, there's hydrogen gas out there, hydrogen fuel that's being used. But from a reporting standpoint, that's starting to come a little bit, but it's probably a few years away. But on the domestic trucking side, you can do it today.
And at Aimbridge, we utilize a third party to do that, but we have a team that actually monitors that, not only from all of the consumption of, the utility consumption, the trash waste, so on and so forth. So it's a massive effort. But from a design perspective and a construction perspective, I still think we rely heavily on the designers and we rely heavily on the vendors and the suppliers. I think our biggest opportunity to really make an impact is on the construction, because there is still a tremendous amount of waste in construction. I mean, people throw stuff away right and left when you're like, that's good stuff. And the comment is, but it costs more to stack it and go pay a restocking fee than it does to just throw it away. Yeah. Well, we've got to change that mindset. You got to change that behavior, and you got to think differently about that, because everything we do impacts the planet. Okay. So, any other questions? Let me see if I can, I couldn't quite hear you, but from a sustainability perspective, once the design is finished, if there's other stuff that comes about related to a change order, how do we address that? Was that kind of your question?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
More pertaining to like when it comes to sustainability or a global effort. If something comes along that fits both the brand expectation, but also various ESG or sustainability measures, is that worth dying on the hill over? Is that worth pushing towards a change order?
Well, I think from our perspective, we're managing other people's money. It's our job to present the options to our owners and help our owners understand the importance of not only the sustainable aspect of it, the first cost, the maintenance cost, the guest impact. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, but being able to actually share that information with them so they can make informed decisions, and they've got, it's a comprehensive decision. Because I know we've all gone through this before of, well, it costs more and I'm not going to do it. Well, you got to somehow convince an owner that there's some intangible benefits that the guests want. And we're actually starting to see it in our business. Meeting planners are asking for sustainability. They want to know what we're doing, how we're doing it. And they're actually putting it in the RFPs to actually go to more greener hotels, if you will. From our perspective, we're beginning to see that. But again, it's educating. I don't know if you guys have had different experiences on that. Okay. I think we may have time for maybe one more question. All right. Oh, there's one. Yes.
What's best practices or strategies with regard to liquidating or retiring FF&E?
That's a big one. I mean, there's many ways of doing it. And the best way to do it is not throw it in a landfill.
Yeah.
What I always do, and I always try to convince our owners to do, is when we go into town, see if we can find a charity that we can donate the product to a charity, and then the owner gets a slight tax write-off, but you're helping someone else. Then there's also the liquidation side of things to try to reuse it. But that's kind of my perspective. Do you have any other insight on that?
Yeah, there's a firm called Good 360. Come talk to me after. I can tell you a little more about them. But they do exactly what David was saying. They take product and find, second use for it. So there's a lot of companies out there that do that.
Okay. Great. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.